Coach and them were freezing, but they were not going to let us drop that ball and not go around them dadgum poles. That was the way things were. That's it in a capsule. There were no shortcuts. Okay, well, my name is Jabo Leonard. I started playing high school football as a freshman in fall of '68, and we were the first class to be in the new high school that was built off of Eagle Drive. We were freshman class. Played as on the JV team as a freshman, and then moved into the varsity beginning my sophomore year. I was a starting quarterback my sophomore, junior, and senior years at Barbers Hill. And was a kicker. Didn't really play any defense to mount anything, and so that was my tenure there. And then later, when I graduated, I went and played at Lamar University in Beaumont.
Jabo, you set many records in the kicking game during your career. Can you tell us how your love for kicking was developed and what that process was like?
And I started learning to kick when I was a kid, living in oil fields. We had a single-car garage, and of course the beam on that building was probably about the height of a crossbar, and was about the width because it was just big enough for one car to go into. And as a kid, I remembered being out in the front yard, and I'd put the football in a shoe. That would be my tee. I didn't have a tee, and I'd kick balls. And my dad was good friends with the head coach at Barbers Hill, Lloyd Kelly at the time, and Coach Kelly would give him some old balls. So I had about 3 balls. And I'd kick them and try to kick it right over the garage. Then I'd go get them. I'd come back and just over and over. And then when I was 9, Coach Kelly gave us about 6 balls, and they were older, and we started going to the football field up on the old hill, and I started bona fide kicking, 70, 80, 90 kicks, just about every day. We'd go up. My dad would do that. I kicked all the way until I was 23, 24 years old when I was trying to kick professionally and was still working out. And to my dad's credit, that I recall, when I ever said, "Dad, let's go kick some balls," he never said, "I don't have time for that." He always would go and we could kick balls. And toward the end, we'd have a dozen balls and we'd kick about 12 and then go get them, bring them back and kick them, and we'd do 100, 150 kicks a day usually for about 9 months out of the year. During the wintertime, we'd shut it down. It was too wet, too cold, and then as soon as we got to spring, things warmed up, we started kicking again.
I know Barbers Hill had a semi-pro baseball team that was started in the late 1920s. What was the result of this for Barbers Hill athletics in the 1950s and 60s?
Barbers Hill oil field came in 1928. When they found out around these domes on the coast that sometimes there was supplies of oil that was right around the domes that had been caught in the sand. So that we had a town that was built that way. You had oil wells encircling the dome, and everybody lived inside the oil wells on top of the dome, which the dome is a few thousand feet below surface, but it pushed the soil up, which made a small hill, i.e. Barbers Hill. Okay, the land belonged to the Barbers. It had about a 15, 18-foot hill, and that's where everybody lived. That's where the town was. And then you had the oil wells where the oil was found encompassed us. And so these baseball teams, baseball was number one sport in the United States. Football was just barely getting going back then. And so these oil companies were hiring people that were good ball players to play on the local teams and so forth. It was common for that to happen. And the Barbers Hill team was called the Gushers, Barbers Hill Gushers. And some of these family men that were recruited in to work in the oil field and play baseball. That was 1928, so they started having children. That began to be the gene pool that the Barbers Hill athletes were coming out of. The Matthews, Spears, the Mills, that's three names I remember who had really good athlete kids. There were others as well, which I'm not sure of right now. But the bottom line was that we had a concentration for a small population of some really, really talented kids, so therefore, in 1956, we won the state relay with these guys. And we had a guy that won the 100 and won the 220. These were yards back then. And then we won the sprint relay and won the track meet. And then that's when the really good teams started showing up too. And that's when Lloyd Kelly, who had just graduated from Sam Houston State, was hired to be the head football coach at Barbers Hill in about 19. I think he started at 54, 55, something like that. And that's when we started winning regional championships regularly. And at that time, we were Class B, which today would be Class 2A. They wouldn't let teams that were in what they call Class B play to a state championship. We would win the regional championship and the season would be over. Why? I don't know. But Barbers Hill would have won probably minimum 2, maybe as many as 4 or 5 more state championships from about 56 Gardens and M's senior year, to 65. Those 9 years, we had about 6 regional champions. And at least half of them could have won the state championship, I'm sure, because in some of the years, they'd win the regional game by 30 or 40 points and season be over. That's Barbers Hill's story. And then, of course, finally we tie for one in 71, and then we win one outright in 76, and that's the last one,
Jabo, what do you remember about the arrival of Coach Sharp at Barbers Hill?
He showed up in the fall of 68, my 8th grade year. Well, I met him pretty much as soon as he got here, because my dad was always at the school for workouts and stuff. He worked graveyards for 20-something years. So he would come home, go to bed, get up in the afternoon. He'd go to school and watch the workouts. He'd carry me with him. Or I would stay at school in the gym, bounce on a trampoline or whatever, and he would come on up, watch the workouts, and take me home. And so I met him really early.
Coach Sharp was famous for some of his shenanigans. What are a few of your favorites?
One time we practiced a play. We were beating somebody by 70-something to nothing or whatever. It's some crazy score, because we were ahead one game 72 to nothing at halftime. Okay, we were ahead by a team 42 to nothing with 2 minutes or something to go in the first quarter one year, which was a state record for a long time, most points in a quarter. But anyway, so he sends in. Okay, well, in practice we had run a play where I threw a pass backwards to the split end, Roy Hughes, and he would catch it behind me, which made him an eligible passer if he wanted to be. And our tight end, Lynn Jigo, would run a diagonal to the other flag over there. And he could throw the ball pretty good, Roy Hughes could, and we'd throw that long pass. It was going to be a trick play. So Gene had a lot of sense of humor, and so he sent in, okay, I want y'all to run that play with Jigo and Roy Hughes that we practiced. This is how it came in. Tell them this. And I said, I want you to do it at the line. Okay, all right. So y'all got it on at the line, go to the line. And I get behind the center and go, all right, we're going to run that play that we ran Thursday, okay, where I throw the ball backwards to Roy Hughes and he hits Jigo on a long flag route across the field on the color, blue. And I took it and I threw it out there to Roy Hughes. He catches it and Jigo's wide open and he overthrew him. But they didn't cover it. I mean, that was the kind of nonsense, because Coach Sharp had a sense of humor. I'm a freshman. We're playing Magnolia at Humble. And I got moved. I was B-Bomber, JV B-Bomber. They called them B-Bombers that year until the playoffs. He moved me up for the playoffs. And the only other freshman was Doucette. He was on the varsity. So just me and Doucette was up there. And it was cold. And I remember we had people were wearing thermals underneath their uniforms because, we didn't know how to deal with this cold. but anyway, so Coach Sharp, being the playful guy he is, Magnolia, they had a guy named Monday Friday, and I can't remember, but they were huge. And we had played them in the 8th grade and had beaten them in the 8th grade. But they had a lot of very, very large kids. I mean, they were just big. And they were ranked number 3 in the state, and we weren't ranked anything then because that was just the second year he'd been there. And we did win district, but we weren't supposed to be any big threat to anybody. And they were ranked 3rd in the state. And so he puts on the thermals, white thermal underwear and top. He had a little belly on him and everything. And he did the Superman logo all on the front of it. And I don't remember exactly what he did, but when we got ready to go out before we did his speech and everything, he comes running out, and he's going around. I'm Superman. This is who we're going to be tonight, Superman. We're all laughing, having a big laugh out of it, I don't remember what all they said, but the other coaches didn't know he was going to do it. He did. Nobody knew he was going to do it. And he did that, And so then we finally got together and went out and we beat him. All of a sudden he got a doctor appointment after school. He can't be there. So we're going out there with Capella and Richardson. And it really was, y'all go out there and y'all go torch, y'all give him a good workout. I'll show up about 4:30, or 5 o'clock, and he'd come out, hey, how y'all doing? I'm back. Boy, we're going, thank God, coach. And, oh, well, y'all done enough. I think y'all need to go on in. He'd be the savior, you know what I mean? And Coach Sharp was like a dad to really all of us. He was fun-loving. He told stories. He was like a big kid. I mean, he laughed about the same kind of stuff we laugh about, and he made it fun. I know if any athletes you talk from this era, they're going to all say that Coach Sharp made it fun. We did wild stuff at practice, and it was brutal, some of it. But when you got a guy like that, it took care of any kind of bad feelings you might have. The way they're treating us. You knew he loved you. They're just treating you bad. You know what I mean? But yeah, he was. I could tell a lot of stories on him, but that was his biggest key was that, one, he was a good coach, and 2, he was a great leader, but he made it fun. And that makes a big difference.
I understand that during practice, towels played a significant role in hydration. Can you describe how that worked?
Back then, inexplicably, nobody realized you got to hydrate. You need water, and water was a scarce commodity. We had no trainers. It wasn't like they filled up some igloo buckets and took them out. Now the coaches could have, but nobody did it. We just went out and they'd have a 2.5, 3-hour workout, and they'd plan one little 5-minute break, and it might be a hose over there that hooked up to an old hose bib, and everybody had to run over and get a drink out of the hose. It was just ambient temperature, and that was your one chance to get a drink because they're not thinking about water, And so we would get, sometimes when it was bad, our trainer, who was a kid, really, we called him a trainer. He was really a kid. His dad was a doctor, and his dad would come with us in the game, would be our kind of doctor on the field during the games, okay? But his name was French, and the little trainer, and he would go get towels, soaked towels, and sneak them out there. And then when we were not in the play or in that little practice session, he would hand the towels out, and we would suck water out of those towels. Just you'd suck and hand it to the next guy. You didn't care about, there wasn't no hygiene going on here. It was just, I need water.
I know Robert Capella was your backfield coach at Barbers Hill. What was his reputation as a coach while he was in the Valley?
He was a starting quarterback. He played at Texas A&I. He was a quarterback. He was a migrant. He and his brothers, he had 2 brothers. There were 3 of them. But he had a great arm, and he was quick, and just tough. All he knew was tough. When you're a migrant, grew up picking in the, what kind of life is that? No money. So he goes to A&I, graduates, comes back and coaching in the Valley with Coach Sharp in Mission at that time. And he was coaching the JV team while Gene was down there coaching the varsity. Coach Capella took the JV team and they just killed everybody's JV. And he tortured his JV teams, okay? And he became, and he coached basketball, all right? And he got a reputation down there, I guess, because that leads to this story. So I'm at Sterling and I'm on the varsity. I'm in the high school, and I got junior high coaches would go with me on Friday night to scout. So we'd be scouting a team for about 4 weeks, getting scouting reports. And when we played that team, we'd hand them all our information and get on the next team. Me and these two guys, one of them was a Hispanic guy that was in a junior high. They were both from junior high, and one was from Highlands. And so we would meet on Friday afternoon. Where are we going? We're going to Deer Park. We're scouting Deer Park tonight. And what was going on sometimes is you start telling war stories, and they're telling stories about this coach did this and this coach did that and all this kind of stuff. And I'm not even telling anything because I didn't want to sound like oh, you got yours, I got a better story than you, right? And in the process of talking, I said, well, where were you? And he said, I was down down in the valley somewhere. And I said, well, I had a coach from the valley down there that was my coach. He came when I was a freshman. I was a back, and he was a back coach. His name was Robert Capella. And when I said Robert Capella, he just stopped. It just stopped him. Okay, he stopped. He kept driving. All right, but he said Robert Capella. Yeah, he was from Mission. He said Robert Capella coached you for 4 years. That's right, he did. He was pretty bad. And that coach turned around to the guy in the back that he was driving. He said, I'm going to tell you this right now. Quit telling stories. Because he said, because this guy has done a lot more than you or I ever have. And because he had a reputation, even and that kid wasn't from Mission, and he was that way at the basketball too. He's now the winningest basketball coach in the history of Texas. Dominated the Valley down there for decades. Just never won a state championship because he never had any height. They'd get up here and eventually they'd get beat in the regionals. They never made it to the state meet, but he won a lot of ball games. But that's that story. That when he heard Robert Capella, he went, just shut up. You don't. He's got stories that you don't even want to know about. He just knew. I said, yeah, I got some stories, but we won't go into all of them tonight.
What drills do you associate with Coach Capella?
The Gauntlet Drill was, I don't know how they dreamed this one up, but bottom line was they would line up, they'd get on like the hashes down the field, and the offensive backs would have the ball, and every 5 yards, or maybe every 10, but they were segmented, there would be two defensive players, two defensive linemen, linebackers, whatever, and for the whole squad. And always the front two were senior varsity. They were the bad guys. And they would stand shoulder to shoulder, and you had to get between them. And they could hammer you, and you had to carry the ball and not fumble. It was a quote, quote, fumble drill, okay? Well, it really was a torture drill. But so, and then when you'd finally, like maybe a guy named David Hargraves and Robert Nayland, I remember, were two captains, really two of our best players. With that, Robert was all-state offensive lineman. David was all-district and really good too. And they were big and strong. And they were the first two, and you had to get through them, and they'd beat you to death before you finally got an arm through, and you had to get through. And then as soon as you got through them, you had the next two, and then the next two, and then the next two. By the time you get to the end, you were just beat to death. And if you fumbled, you started over. So I don't know how quality drill that was, but I almost think the coaches just got a kick out of seeing us have to do it, So anyway, that was the Gauntlet. Well, put it like this: it was an inside the tackle offensive drill, and you had a linebacker, you had a center, linebacker, and they were going to hand you the ball, and you had to run between some dummies, and the center had to try to cut the linebacker off, and then the linebacker was trying to scrape and tackle you in the B gap. And so it was real hard on the center because he's having to snap the ball to a quarterback who's handing it to the back, and called a ping pong drill. That's what Coach Capella called the ping pong drill. And depending on how you did the ping pong drill, if you didn't run tough, you didn't do something right, you fumbled the ball, we usually did it on one end zone, and he'd say, go around the poles, which meant go around the other end 120 yards, turn around, and come on back. And if you really messed up, you had to crab crawl the whole 240 yards, all right, which in uniform, which is as you know, it's no fun. Your arms are just like rubber. Of course, as soon as you get back, it's your turn again. That's the way that worked. And if you really messed up, then they'd have what they called bird dogs. And so they'd have somebody stand there, and if you weren't aggressive enough in a drill, in some kind of hitting drill, they would holler, bird dog, and they just come hit you. I mean, you might be on the ground, just hit you on the ground. Of course, screaming like a banshee the whole time they're doing it, because you had to look like you was a fighting rooster. You had to have all your cockle out. Anyway, that's the kind of drills we did, and usually thirsty and tired when all that would go on.
With everything that you went through during practice, did the thought of quitting football ever cross your mind?
We had one event where we went over to West Hardin when I was a junior. We played bad, 3-3 at halftime. We ended up winning 27-3, but we played really bad. And they brought us home the next week and said, we're going to fix this come Monday. And they just basically tortured us Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 3 days in a row. That was the time when everybody, I promise you, probably had to think, how bad do I want to play football? And of course, nobody quit, but everybody thought about it. I don't know what, but that's the way it went. And we had we were state 70 that year. That's when we really had our best team. We had senior line, junior backs, and receivers. And we ended up getting beat by White Oak that year, but in the quarters. But they tortured us for 3 days. Then they let us take it a little easy on Thursday, and we went to Warren to play at Warren. And the first play, they ran the kickoff back and made a 2-point extra point. We're down 8-0, going, oh my God, we cannot let this happen again. We ended up beating them about 70-8 or something like that. But anyway, that was an interesting week at practice, and that was the one that always, y'all don't want another week like after West Hardin, do you? No, Coach, we don't.
I've heard that sometimes practices were held on a variety of surfaces. Care to explain?
On one of the summer practices is a Saturday. They said, okay, we're going to run from the new high school to the old high school, and we're going to practice. We're going to practice on the old field. Get us off the new field at the new high school out on Eagle Drive. Well, I guess what is it, about 2.5, 3 mile run? We had a torturous long. It was a morning workout. We're talking July 35th. Temperature in the morning, hot, humid, no water. And then when that was over, we had to run back to the high school or get back any way you wanted to. They'd let you walk on the way back, and we had to go back. So that was just why they came to them. Well, could have got a bus. Take us on a bus, we'd be fresher for the practice. No, I think we'll just have them a run up there. That was the way things were, man. 2 weird things. One day, before I get to the plowed field, it had been a big rain, and they didn't want to get on the football field because it was a grass field, and it was already later in the year between the hash marks, because we practiced on the playing field. It didn't hardly have any grass on it. It was pretty much dirt, with just a little Bermuda still alive on it. So they didn't want to get on it when it's wet. So we practiced in an asphalt parking lot. And we just went we just practiced on it like it was dirt, like it was grass. Same plays, same turn in the corners. We'd go down, get skin up. It didn't make any difference. We practiced with spikes, which slippery. It wasn't like we had on cross country type footings. I don't know where they came up with that idea. The parking lot was dry, or at least it had drained, so no, not muddy. Let's get out there. I think they got a little blowback on that, maybe. I'm not sure. But the next time we had a wet field, on the north side of the high school was a plowed rice field off of Eagle Drive. Of course, that was years ago when everything wasn't there like it is today. And we went out there and we practiced, we scrimmaged moving the chains about 15 yards every time we ran a play on a plowed rice field, and we went to the canal, which is a half mile up the road. And then we found, I think as I recall, we got out, we walked back. We scrimmaged, I probably ran 40 plays, 50 plays. Nobody broke an ankle. Nobody got hurt. But we could have. You know, I don't know why we did that. Why didn't we go in a gym? You know, but it was just, but I will say this, those kind of experiences, I remember it. So, you know, it made an impression on us back then. And we just thought we were just bulletproof. You know, by the time you get through some of this stuff, the deal was the game is going to be the fun. They made sure that the practices were about practicing, and I think a little torture. All right. They would always say, now we get to get our reward on Friday night. So I can remember as a senior by the time I got to my senior years, my third year to be starting, and every time I had a game, scheduled, I don't have but 9 more games left. I got 8 more games. I got 7 more games. And I'm thinking, don't waste them. Don't waste them. And they tell us, don't waste these nights. You know, these nights are special. You're going to remember them the rest of your life. They were right. You know, and then the playoffs the same way. You know, just remember it. You know, play hard and hopefully we move on. But be sure you take time to consider what you're doing, because it could be your last game, you know.
I keep hearing there were no shortcuts and everyone was treated equally. Do you have a story that illustrates this?
I will tell you a real quick anecdote, all right? This was me and Rodney Porter. So this was when Rodney was a senior, and we're in the playoffs. And so we weren't going to play on our field anymore. So if we messed it up, it didn't make any difference. So it had been a big bunch of rain. And we go out on the field. And a norther had come in. It was cold and raining, all right? And it rained all day, and it was cold. It's one of those north winds. Probably temperature was in the high 30s with wind chill, probably maybe sub-freezing. But they were going to go out to practice. We were going to practice. It was Thursday. We were going to run plays, which is what we did. Just run some plays and talk a little bit maybe. But it was kind of like almost they didn't want us to go hunting, so we're going to have practice. Because if they had canceled practice, then people would have been heading out hunting that afternoon, duck hunting or goose hunting right there by the high school, because that was all rice field. So we had practice, and we were, and Rodney was my center, and he was a senior, I was a junior, and we were trying to run some plays. Well, the ball got muddy, and we fumbled the ball. Capella, around the poles, you and Rodney around the poles. So we're on about our 20. We're on a negative 20. We got to go 90 yards to get to the poles and then 90 yards back. Crab crawling. Not crab crawling, bear crawling. Forward, head forward. So, and it's in mud, it's cold, you're freezing, you got your uniform on, it's miserable, all right? We get back. I line up. Same play at the line. The ball is a pig, greased pig. I drop it again. Y'all go again. This is how they were. So 180 yards again. And by the time we get there, we're just spent, okay? Just barely. We're not talking. Rodney and I are not talking. We're not cursing. We're not doing anything. We're trying to survive. We line up a third time. Miss a snap. Go again. When we got down on the other end, I remember Rodney was in front. We're going around the pole. And Rodney said, Jabo, you got to get the snap. And I said, my God, Rodney, I'm trying. Well, we got back, and sure enough, we got the snap. I handed it off. We ran 44 double power or something, just a standard play, and they hollered, everybody in, because they were freezing. Coach and them were freezing, but they were not going to let us drop that ball and not go around them dadgum poles. That was the way things were. That's it in a capsule. There were no shortcuts, and we had to get a snap. It didn't make a hill of beans whether we got that snap. It was a mud hole. We didn't even need to be out there. We shouldn't even have gone out there. But since we went out there, we're not ending on a fumble. We're going to end on running a play, and we had to get a snap. And we got it the third time, but not before we went 190 times 3. 570 yards of bear crawling in mud, cold, wet slop. That was standard operating procedure at Barbers Hill in fall of 1970. Rodney starting center. I'm second-year quarterback. We're in the playoffs. You know, it wasn't like we were yahoos, but everybody got treated the same. You were just another, you know, and that was the beauty part of it. Everybody knew everybody was, we're all in this thing together. There ain't nobody any more special than anybody else, you know. A kid that's maybe not quite as star a player might mess up and send him around the pole. And then the big quarterback drops the ball. Well, let's just run it again. Big quarterback, you get around there with that guy that don't play on Friday night too. You just like him. Let's go. It started my sophomore year, I believe, on the away scrimmage when we got back from Belleville, or we scrimmaged Newton one year and Belleville 2 times. I think it was Belleville 2 times and Newton 1 time. But we wouldn't get back till midnight. They'd turn the lights on, you know, and we'd driven, pray to scrimmage, come back on the bus. It's midnight. We're going to go run. Not because they were mad. It was just, they just didn't have anything to do at midnight that night, I guess. You know, they turned the lights on and we run 50-50s. 2 groups, linemen, backs. On the color, blue. Linemen had to sprint 50 meters. You better sprint or you go back and start over. Backs, blue. 50 meters, 50 of them. 2,500 meters or 2,500 yards, 50 times 50 of sprinting. That would be a hard workout if you were fresh, but at the end of a long day and all the bus ride and playing a scrimmage, it was hard, and mentally it was hard. And that's really what they were after, being mentally hard on us. But, you know, we did it. But, you know, and it felt, when we finally ran that 50th one, the first time, there was some bonding went on there. We did it. When they said, we're going to run 50 of these, we thought, no, we're not. Nobody runs 50-50s. Who's going to count them? Well, they counting them. That's 1. That's 2 till 50. Got them done. Took, what, hour? I don't know how long it takes to run 50. It takes a while. You know, they'd let us run. You'd walk 10 yards and walk back. Here we go. Go. And probably as we got into the higher numbers, they started giving us a little bit more time, but they weren't going to come off that 50 number. They weren't going to, well, maybe 40's enough. No. They said 50, it's going to be 50. And that's what we knew too. And don't loaf, because you go back by yourself. If everybody else is running, you're the only one, you go back, you lineman, go back, you run this one with the backs. Or vice versa. You go back and run with that other group. So, and that became a standard operating thing after our away scrimmage. But it was also a bonding thing. Because we were getting like, we're pretty tough. Mentally and physically, we can put up. I know one thing, when we get to the game on Friday night, they ain't done the work we've done. We weren't unique in that, but we were probably, there are not a lot of teams that get to that point where they just know, you hadn't done what we done. We deserve to beat you, and we're going to beat you. That was how we walked on the field. Now, was it duplicated in Sonoras? You know, probably. But we didn't know it. But I can tell you one thing, they didn't do any more than we did.
Coach Pudgy Richardson was a well-respected line coach and perfected the blocking schemes Coach Sharp brought to Barbers Hill. Tell us a little bit about the system that was used.
And he coached the offensive line and did a great job. We ended up having very, very good offensive line play. In fact, of course, this had to do with what Gene brought, but we had a very sophisticated blocking schemes that other teams just didn't have. We had your basic, we called it the rule block, which is inside gap on near linebacker was the rule. So if somebody's in the inside gap, he's your guy. If he's on you, if it's not there, he's on you, he's your guy. If there's nobody inside gap on you, it's the nearest linebacker. Well, that was called base blocking for everybody else. Everybody else called that base. And that's pretty much what everybody was running, because when they started to veer and stuff, that's how they blocked it, you know. We didn't just have rule, though. Rule or base, whatever you want to call it. We had out blocking. We had power blocking. We had gut blocking. We had wedge blocking. And after University of Texas in 1969 won the national championship, Gene was watching the line play, and on the back side of all of their right-handed running plays, or the right side on all of their left-handed running plays, the offensive linemen were literally, when the snap of the ball, were turning like this and going down the line of scrimmage and up. He named it offside wedge. So on all of our play side, we were blocking one of those schemes: base, power blocking, which the guy whose number called, like the 4 guy, would block the first inside. They'd double the first inside guy. The back would lead on the next guy. It'd be and in the back room would be following. Might be 2 backs leading in, 44 double power, 34 power would be 1 block, with a tailback going around them or whatever. Anyway, so that was our scheme. We had gut blocking, tight end, tackle would both block first man inside. Guard would pull and kick out on the defensive end as a gut block. Anyway, we had these different schemes, which I found out later. Well, I didn't know everybody wasn't doing this kind of stuff. So I got over at Lamar, and we weren't doing that stuff at Lamar either. It was pretty much base blocking, and that was in college. And so we were real sophisticated. And later had a guy call me who coached against us back then. He saw it all on video and stuff. And we never got to visit, but he's the one told me, you do realize that y'all were using reach blocking that everybody's doing. You know how everybody reaches now? And they run a lane and you block whoever shows up, right? Well, that was new. And but we were ahead of, and when you see the video, you're going to see that on the video. You'll see our left tackle, our left guard, and our center and them. If we're running the B or C gap or something, they're just folding up in there. Well, when you do that, you don't allow any penetration. A guy lines up on me, he's right on head up on me on a tackle or guard or whatever. Well, if I'm turning this way and my tackle's turning that way and you're trying to run around me and get in the backfield, tackle will pick you up. And the line play was precision. And you'll see that when you look at that video I brought you today. It was really, so that's a credit to Carol Richardson there. They really were good, man. I mean, and when that ball snaps, they're moving. You'll see it. Because when I watched it one time, I went, my God, those guys were good. They may not be big, but we were hard to keep from getting 3 or 4 yards because there just was no way. I don't care what stunt you called, it picks it all up, And people were used to stunts, exposing stuff, because people were trying to get on that near linebacker, and that linebacker disappeared. Well, when you're offside wedging, he's going to disappear, but you're going to pick him up over here, So that was we're a little ahead of our time at that time. Yeah, Carol Pudgy Richardson, credit to him on that. Now, Gene was the one that brought the blocking scheme. And he brought it all, and he brought our defense, which was what we called a split 4. First time I ever saw it was Tennessee in the Cotton Bowl. That's what Tennessee was running against Texas. Texas beat them. That was in '68. Texas probably had the best team in the country when they beat Tennessee in the Cotton Bowl, but they had lost a game at the beginning of the year and had tied UCLA and was 0-1-1 when Bill Bradley was moved out of quarterback and James Street took over, and they went to the wishbone, and then rest was history. They didn't get beat again that year, and they didn't get beat in the next year either. They won the national championship the next year. But Gene picked all that up on the video.
Personal fouls were not allowed at Barbers Hill. How were opposing players' personal fouls dealt with?
We were not allowed to get personal foul penalties. We got one time in the second game of the year, my sophomore year, where one of our athletes got in a fight off the field. Somebody hit him late, or he hit somebody late. I don't remember how it all started, but it was at Hampshire Finette. There was a fight, and we got a 15-yard penalty. They tortured us for that and made it clear we don't get 15-yard personal foul penalties. They get the personal foul penalty. I don't care if they hit you in the mouth. You don't hit them back. Just because they're going to show their rear doesn't mean you got to do it. Have a little class. Have a little composure. Let them get the 15-yard penalty. Let them get thrown out of the game. Show your class. When you just get right back in their face, no place for that. Well, we didn't do it. 12 games that year, 13 games the next year, and 15 games the next year. That was the last time we got a personal foul penalty. Well, okay, so I said one of the ways that we had blocked was wedge blocking. If you can imagine wedge blocking, if that's the 5 offensive linemen, and let's say they had a nose guard. This is our center, he's on the nose, all right? So at the snap of the ball, the center would center punch the nose guard as best he could, and this guy would fold in right behind him, and he would fold in right behind him, and he would fold in right. They would both offside wedge from both sides, and the tight end. So there'd be 3 coming from, say, if we were in normal right formation. So there'd be 6 guys, and the apex of the wedge would be on the defensive lineman. So if they didn't have a nose and he was on the guard or in the gap or inside shoulder of the guard or whatever, then the guard would be the apex of the wedge. Okay? You always want the apex to be on a defensive lineman because you wanted to be able to establish a point that everybody else could wedge in on and just keep your feet moving. So what would happen was we would play people. We're beating the dog out of people. It's embarrassing. You know, retrospectively, I can imagine why people would get frustrated because we're just first down, running over them, score getting out of hand. And somebody would, you know, start slugging somebody or acting like a rear. Coach Sharp would just send in, because they sent in plays. They didn't signal anything back then. They sent in a play and say, just run. If he says the defensive tackle, it's usually somebody in the defense, not DBs. It'd be somebody up there was in the scrub going on, you know, between offense and defensive fronts. He'd say, let's run 32 wedge until number 68 gets off the field. And say maybe that was a defensive tackle on line up on our guards. We're going to run 2 wedges, 32 wedge. And he'd say at the line. Well, when we would do play, when they would say at the line, that meant we're not making a huddle. And I'd say 32 wedge on the color. Blue! We'd run over him. As soon as as the pile was unpiling, I would start saying 32 wedge at the line, on the color. Soon as they got the umpire would get the ball straight, you know, guy behind the linebacker, umpire, referee, get the ball down. Blue! Run over him again. I'd use the same color too. Blue. 32 wedge on the color. Blue. Run over him. At the line. We'd line up. Blue. Run over him again. And we're making first downs. We're running over him, and they ain't getting any penetration. And we just kill the guy. And he would get off the field. Either he would get hurt, but real quick, by the second time we did it, he realized this ain't going to stop. They're going to keep doing this until what? How am I going to get relief from this? I need to stay down. I need to get off the field because they're going to make first downs and they're going to run it all the way to the other end zone like this. And that's what we'd do. So we would, don't mess up and show your rear to our offensive linemen just because they're whipping you. Don't get mad. Swing at them or cuss at them or act a rear because we had something for you and it's all legal. And we would never say nothing. We weren't going to get any penalties. We just going to run them. I know what what those referees had to be thinking. It's good. I'm glad they're running over that joker because he's you know what I mean? I could have given him a personal foul penalty. Or they might have got a penalty. That didn't mean they were off the hook. Here comes 32 wedge, brother. You're not only going to get the 15-yard penalty, you're going to go to the sideline. And that's what would happen. Because what could you do? Just think about that. I promise you, when that started, it was 4-down territory. I don't care where we were. We were going to run it 4 times, and we were going to make a first down. That was, and you know, we kind of liked that. Because we knew we can't talk, we can't hit back, we can't cuss back. We had to act like Boy Scouts. But we had something for you in our own way.
The physical nature of practices helped to prevent injuries during the games. How did the coaching staff deal with injuries?
We didn't stay on the field when we got hurt. If you could get off the field, you got off the field. There wasn't any, got a leg hurt and you're 3 feet off from being off the field and you're going to lay there. Get over here and get off the field where we can play football. You know what I mean? That was the attitude. We didn't have anybody lay on the field from an injury from my entire sophomore, junior, and all the way through my senior year until the first playoff game against West Sabine Pineland. We're playing over in Liberty, and when a kid got his knee just completely wrecked and he couldn't get off the field. And they came out and got him. And that was the last one that year. One time. Get off the field. That's for playing football. It ain't for laying on.
During the playoffs, Coach Sharp would have team events the night before a game. Tell us about the night J.W. Grimes showed up.
What we'd do when we were juniors and seniors, only happened my junior and senior year, on Thursday night, after we'd go do playtime on Thursday afternoon, and we'd get together and maybe go out to the country club or somewhere and build a bonfire. And we were big singers. We'd sing on the bus, and we'd sing all the country western songs, and we even had Doug Morris, the guitar guy, come with us every now and then. He'd play and sing. He's a good singer too. And we'd sing, and just camaraderie type deal. And then Mr. Grimes, J.W. Grimes, played the guitar, and he sang as well. And he came out to the country club and stuff, and we would pick and sing, and then we would eat. Somebody would cook something, cook hot dogs or whatever. And there were different little things, like when we played the Roughnecks at White Oak, we all wore oil field hard hats, the old silver kind is what everybody wore back then. And we wore them around on Friday. Just different ways of making Coach Sharp, making it fun, right? One interesting anecdote happened with Mr. Grimes, and Gene told me this later. He said, well, we had J.W. come out there, Jabo, on that night before we was going to play White Oak that second year when y'all were seniors. And we got out there, and y'all were all wearing those hard hats and stuff, and he was wearing a Stetson cowboy hat, because that's what he wore. He's bald-headed. And we're all talking, the captains would talk, and Gene would talk, and everybody would talk, and it was just the brotherhood would talk and about what, different things. I can't remember what would go around, but everybody have a chance to talk what the game meant to us and how we appreciate this, appreciate that. And it came time for Mr. Grimes to talk. And we had already done some singing before. We'd done some singing, and then the talking all started. And he said, well, I can tell right now we got a fire burning. I got the wrong hat on tonight. He took that Stetson off, threw it in the fire. Gene said, I couldn't believe he did it. He said, that's Stetson hat. That's a $100 hat back in the 1970s. That was some money. And it was his dress hat. It wasn't like something you'd wear around because you're going to be in the sun today. It was a dress-up hat. He burned it up, man. He said, now, and then he had, I don't remember what was memorable that he said, but he was a very good orator, and I'm sure he had some sage advice. But that's think of the climate that was, what that meant to us. I mean, we didn't want him to burn his hat, but God, he burned his hat up. He's all in. You know what I mean? If he's all in, we got to be all in,
You were the starting quarterback at Barbers Hill for 3 years. Who was the toughest team you faced during that time?
Another kudos to Coach Sharp. Right at the end of the summer in 1970, that's when integration was still being forced on people. Dave Campbell magazine had come out, and there was 2 schools in that district up there in East Texas. They were picked 1 and 2 in the district. Early in the summer, the federal courts made them integrate. So they're going to be 1 high school. Well, they got 500 kids in it now. They were big Class A schools, which went up to about 250 or 260, I think, back then. Well, they had 2 of them together, they had 500 of them, and they were picked 1 and 2 in district. So Gene realized they're going to be loaded. And he knew they had a good quarterback, too. Beginning of the year, his thinking, he knows we're going to see him in the second round of the playoffs. He got the Beaumont Enterprise, and they would carry St. Augustine scores. And every week on Monday, we'd come in, and he had the St. Augustine, I don't remember their mascot. They had St. Augustine scores there and the whole write-up. And every week, we'd see what they did. And he'd highlight the name of the quarterback, the running backs, what they did, and they're winning. When we get to them, we're winning by around 50 points a game average, and they're winning by, as I recall, 52, 55 or something. And they were good. Coach Sharp and Coach Capella went over to their dressing room before the game because you'd exchange films, reels. And we took their reels back to them, and they gave us our reels back. And Coach Sharp later told me that when he and Robert went over there and they saw those guys, they had their bottoms on and just shimmo shirts on, he said it was eye-opening because they didn't look like us. They had a bunch of tush hogs. Said a bunch of them had beards, not beard, but 9 p.m. shadow faces and hairy bodies and big. The running back was there, and so they came back going, "Wow, we got our hands full." We ended up winning the ball game, 20-12, I think was the final score, or 21-12. Because I remember the last time we had the ball, we were up 9, so we were safe, and we knew we were going to win. But they scored right before half, and then they scored, didn't get the extra point. Then they scored on a fake punt, and he got loose around where one of those linemen picked the ball up. They got laid on the ground type deal, and it worked. And so that's how they got to 12 on us. But our backs were screaming when they ran with the ball and stuff. I mean, this was standard op. Even when we were doing play timing, screaming like wild banshees. What we did, that was Capella influence, and very intimidating. And we were just crushing you, But that was the first game that I remember ever, and the only one that ever really happened while I was playing quarterback, even the next year against some other good teams, where they screaming back at us as loud as we were screaming at them. And all those plays that normally got 5 to 7 to 8 were getting 2 to 3, and it was taking 4 of them to get first downs. And we scored twice in the first half, got 14, and then they scored on the last play of the half, a pass, deep throw in the end zone. All I remember is being glad that night that I was handing the ball off and faking bootlegs. I was not in the fray. And I bet you if you talk to Doucette or Armstrong or anybody, and all those senior offensive linemen, they tell you that was the toughest game they ever played in their life. It didn't sound like different games. When I would call a snap and begin to turn around to hand the ball off, it sounded like bullets going off. It sounded what college sounded like to me the next year. That's what it sounded like. And but we just kept pounding. In the beginning of the second half, we were up 14-12, and we took the opening kickoff. And for whatever reason, I think we screwed it up somehow or another, and somebody got on a knee or something on like the 2-yard line. So we're 1st and 10 from the 2, and there was a big north wind, big wind blowing in our face, and we got to 4th and a foot. We didn't punt it. We went for it because we weren't going to punt it very far anyway. We made it. And then that course of that drive, which took about 9 minutes off the clock, almost the whole third period, was eaten up with that one drive. We went for it on 4th and short 4 times. And it's because we couldn't get a first down with 3 plays. It took 4. But we went for it every time, and that broke their back because that put us up. We got to 21 and they had 12. They had a 2-score game. And they weren't really moving the ball on us. After that first drive, we started handling. They were a big, sweet team, and they had a good big back, but we were pretty good. And we'd come up and get after you, and we did. We had them shut down, and we ended up beating them. I think 21-12 was the final. Might have been 24-12. We may have kicked the field goal. I can't remember for sure.
The team had some legendary battles against White Oak. What can you tell us about the 1970 and 71 playoff games?
And then the next week is when we played White Oak and got beat. And I told you that, the story about how they had 6 touchdowns, all of them over 50 yards on a kickoff return, a 96-yard kickoff return, and 5 times the same play. Touchdowns from over 50 yards out. They only ran it 5 times, touchdown every time. Didn't know what was happening. 3 coaches on the sideline, didn't know what was happening. Figured out later when we looked at the video. First day of practice the next year when we were seniors, that's the first thing we worked on before we did anything. This is how we got beat. This is what we do. This is how we stop it. So we were ready for that stuff the next year. When we played them in the quarterfinals again, we beat them 14-3. One thing we did was our offside 3 technique, Kenneth Barra was quick and strong, and he wouldn't rush. When Barber would sprint out and set up, but he would sprint out and then hand it back to the back, going back the other way. Well, he just played. He was spying the counter draw. He was spying it, and he was quick enough. He didn't always tackle him, but he made him change directions. And when he changed direction, we shut it down that year. And also, our offside linebacker didn't run across the field anymore. He was taking on the center. and Kenneth was staying on the guard. You know what I mean? Who was trying to turn him out. So we had two of them in there. And between the two of them, we stifled that attack, and they really just didn't have enough offense. We also put in bump and run against the receivers, which was legal back then. We never showed it until we got to White Oak. We started working on it the last week of district. So we worked on it for a month to get it ready. And Barber was a really good, he had about 1,000-yard passing, but he had about 1,500 yards running. Okay, but he was a good thrower too. I mean, he's a real good athlete. And they had guys that could run. And he could throw the 15-yard outs and stuff, timed up stuff. And but when we played that bump and run out of nowhere, we're lining up right on the line of scrimmage, and our halfbacks, call them corners now, but our halfbacks were, as soon as the ball was snapped, they were cockfighting them. They weren't letting them get off the line of scrimmage. Nobody did that. They were starting to do it in the pros, but nobody in high school was doing that. Everybody just playing those zones, maybe man, but pretty much zone. We just went man and get off the time, and don't let them go out there and run a 12-yard out and let Barber throw it. So he wasn't seeing what he was used to seeing. He got a little discombobulated. He got frustrated. Beaver's tackling him. He didn't like that. You know what I mean? When he would take off, we had Johnny Hughes who went to Lamar the next year as a cornerback. He was one outside linebacker, and Beaver was the other. So we had two guys that could run, fast, and he couldn't get away from them. I mean, they didn't come over there and just wallow him, but they could get their hands on him, and we tackled him. And like I said, one field goal, fumble, 3 plays, field goal, and that's it. Turn the lights out on him defensively. I was proud of that. That's Gene Sharp. He got out coached a year before by Andy Griffin, Andy Griffin, who went on to be a really high level, one of the, I think he's in the Texas High School Coaches Hall of Honor for his whole career. The next year, Gene outcoached him.
The 1971 state semifinal game with Schulenburg was very close. Tell us about Barbers Hill's comeback victory.
Then we played in the semifinals at Texas A&M's at Kyle Field against Schulenburg again, who had beat us when we were freshmen over in Baytown. And we beat them. Actually, we tied them. They scored twice in the first half on 2 long passes. Their quarterback was named Dimmel. I can't remember the wide receivers, but he was about 6'3" and could run. He ended up going to Michigan and was a stud at Michigan. But he was a sophomore that year, was all-state. He got behind our corner twice, and Dimmel hit him both times, and they scored. And we were doing everything like we always did. First down, running over them, fumble. First down. I'd throw an interception. We had like 6 turnovers we had like 4 turnovers the first half, so we just couldn't get on the board. So we're down 14-0 at halftime. We're kind of panicking because we're going, dang, this is semifinals. We're supposed to win the state championship. And we kept turning the ball over the whole second half. And then finally, we were about to score to make it 14 to either 8 or 7, depending on whether we went for 2 or went for 1. And I threw my last interception, and I was rolling left, and I had to turn like this to throw the ball to a guy running a quick flat out there, and the defensive halfback, the one he called cornerbacks, that defensive halfback cut it, and I threw it a little behind him, and he was able to cut through, get the interception. We tackled him on about the 2-yard line. I remember coming off the field thinking, that's it. It's 14-0. We had to score. We'd hold them. They were going into it was a huge north wind that night. Sure enough, we hold them, and they get about a 12-yard punt into the wind. Now we got the ball on like the 22-yard line or something like that. Boom, boom, boom. We score. We go for 1. We kick it at 7. And they bring the coaches out because back then, the way they broke a tie was on what they call penetrations. That was the first tiebreaker. Which team snapped the ball the most times inside the other team's 20-yard line? It didn't mean that you got tackled on the 8. You had to snap it inside the 20. That was called you got a penetration, and referees kept track of them. That was the first tiebreaker. in Texas playoffs. The second tiebreaker, who had the most first downs. They kept track of those two. And then finally, the third tiebreaker, which I don't know if this ever was put in play in the history of the state, was who got the most yardage. There was not going to be any overtime. And it wasn't for 20 more years, 25 more years. So they brought the coaches out there, and we had 8 penetrations. We'd been inside their 20 8 times, okay? And we had 1 touchdown. We're ahead 8-2 on penetration. We know all we got to do is tie this thing, and we're going to the next round. So we kick off. What happened was on the first play from scrimmage, they brought the ball. They got the ball out to about their 18 or 20 on the kickoff. And on the first play from scrimmage, coach called what we call double blood, which meant both inside linebackers going to run through the A-gaps and just try to cause a fumble if they could, cause as much disruption as they could. And on the first play, 14-7 at that time, Doucette punched the ball loose from the quarterback before he got away from the center good, and the other inside linebacker, Ricky Irby, recovered, and we got 1st and 10. And there's like a minute and 12 minute left in the game. We got a chance to tie this thing, you know. All we got to do is score one more time, and we'd already scored 600 points on the year or something. You know, it's like score. We can score. We're going to win this thing now. And first play, I ran an inside handoff to Armstrong. He was an all-state tailback for us. Rushed for over 100 yards, 23 games in a row. Okay. Went to Sam Houston later and started both ways. This is in 74, 75, when nobody was playing both ways. He was so good, he started inside linebacker and fullback for Sam Houston back in the day. He was a man. About 195 pounds, about 6'1" or 2, and was about a 10, 300-yard man, which means he could run. Anyway, uncommon for that day. But so we're 1st and 10. I'll tell a little story at what happened at that moment in time. We run a wedge, and now we're 2nd down on like the 1-foot line. Well, we're going to score. You know, I mean, nobody's going to keep us making a foot because we got the wedge play. Call timeout. I go to the sideline, and Coach Sharp standing there, both coaches, Capella and Richardson, standing there. And I'm so stupid, but I'm a kid. I go, you want us to score on this down or the next one? He grabbed a hold of my face mask, Coach Sharp, big old guy, jerked me up like that and said, I want to score now. And so, okay, coach, we'll score now. And we went out there and ran 32 wedge, touchdown, kicked the extra point. Of course, everybody was celebrating when we scored, and we had to. Me and my holder, the wingback David Eves, was my holder, and I'm getting ready to kick the extra point to tie the game up. And it was kind of, you know, we were in a huddle, and everybody was celebrating, you know, because it looked like we were going to lose, and all of a sudden now all I got to do is kick an extra point. We go to the line, extra point on the ball, and the line is all moving around, and boy, and I'm seeing the clock run, you know, and I'm going, we're fixing to get everybody is discombobulated here. We need to calm down, take care of this kick. You know, I mean, I do need to make it, because if I don't make it, we lose. All right. So I just told David, don't snap it. Just don't snap it. We'll take a 5-yard penalty. We're going to calm down. And I got everybody in the huddle, and I said, look, calm down. I'm going to make the kick. Just don't let anybody penetrate, and let's don't be off sides. You know, no penalties, and we're in good shape. Okay, let's on the snap, lined up. So now I'm kicking from the 15 instead of the 10-yard line and make the kick, and it's 14-14, and there's like 20 seconds left. We kick off to them, and they fumble, and we have the ball again. And I find out later, everybody y'all need to kick a field goal, because a lot of people think the game's tied, and kick a field goal. We just ran the clock out, you know, because we could have kicked a field goal right then easily, you know, because we were up on the 20-yard line, but we didn't. I just took the ball and ran around back there, and then finally just got down, and the game was over. But that was the semifinals, and then ironically, we ended up tying in the state finals too, 3-3.
In the 1971 state title game, Barbers Hill played Sonora. This game had several big moments that determined the final outcome. What are your memories about this game?
Early in the game, they'd gotten down there and kicked a short field goal with the win. I think they were up 3-0, I believe, as I recall. And then we through it's called 90 Rainbow, and it's drop back pass. He ran out and up. Wayne Follis had caught it, and he's about to score. The safety was coming over to try to intersect before he got to the flag, and he cut back on him and scored untouched. But his foot touched the line when he planted his left foot to cut back in on the 6-yard line. 1st and 10 on the 6. On the first play, we ran 34 drive where I bellied the fullback like 32 wedge, but the tailback would come right off his hip with Armstrong. They used power blocking scheme up front, and I'd give the ball to him after I pulled it from the fullback. It was a belly series, they call it, which was commonplace in the wing T and those kind of offenses, which was real common at that time. And Armstrong, after hand it off to him, goes through about a 6-foot wide hole. He gets tackled on the 1-foot line, but the whistle blew. The umpire thought Doucette the fullback got the ball, and they stood him up because they thought he had the ball. And the umpire saw that, and he blew his whistle. So we're 2nd and 6 from the 6 instead of 2nd and a foot. And like I told you, 32 wedge, we're scoring, But we get 3 yards, now it's 3rd and 3, and we ran something, and they blew it up, and we're 4th and 3, and we had to take a field goal. Still early in the game. It's 3-3. And then later in the game, we threw 5 passes. Gene didn't want to, he told me later he wished he threw the ball more, but he didn't want to make a mistake because Sonora had won 3 straight state championships, and they had, the week before at the semifinals, White Deer looked like they're going to beat them. White Deer made some mistakes, and Sonora just took advantage of them and beat them. And maybe they'd won 2. They were going for the 3rd in a row. That's what it was. They'd won 2. And this Noel, their running back, had been the starting tailback all those years. He was a horse, and they were good. But we finally got the win. Like I told you, when I went out that night, it was about a 25-mile-an-hour north wind blowing. So we didn't ever throw the ball into the wind. We threw it the 5 times we threw it were all when we had the wind behind us. But we could have thrown the ball. We had an all-state receiver, Wayne Follis, particularly when we could have thrown it more when we were the wind, but we didn't. And regrettably now, and I'm sure Coach Sharp thinks the same thing, the way things turned out. But it almost worked out beautifully because in the 4th quarter, we got the win. We start moving the ball from about our 20 or 30, make 3 or 4 first downs, and we're up on about their 40-yard line. Well, in pregame with the win, I was kicking them from 55 yards, just one right after another. And because you got a 25-mile-an-hour wind blowing right at the goalpost, you can't hardly miss it. All you got to do is get the ball up in the air, and because the wind's blowing this way, it don't want to go that way. And it don't want to go that way. It wants to go that way. And we needed one more first down to be in field goal range. And it's late now. It's down 2 minutes to go in a ball game or something. One more first down. And we don't get it. And there was a play called, and they knocked my tight end down right when I was 21 trap pass. I was going to throw the tight end, James Tilton, and they knocked him down. I didn't have a receiver, and then I got sacked. Now it's 4th and 10 or something. We punt it inside their 10. They bring it out to about the guy kind of picks it up. We tackle him on about the 9 or 10-yard line. The wind's in their face. If they got a punt, we're going to get the ball about the 30-yard line. You're not going to punt it into this 25-mile-an-hour north wind further than 20 or 30 yards. We didn't even need to catch it. We just let it roll, and we'll be in field goal range. I'm sitting on the sideline going, we're fixing to win this thing if they don't get this first down. And quite frankly, my whole career, I didn't play defense, but when we got in those moments, they didn't get the first downs. They punted it, you know what I mean? Because our defense would stop them. So 2 downs in a row, we stuffed them. It's 3rd and about 10, and they want to reverse. And it gets 10.5 yards. They make a first down by half a yard. Now they got the clock, Then they run a stop and go, and the receiver's getting past Mattingly, and rather than letting him score, he just tackled him. 15-yard penalty. We moved up, and then they made a first down, and all of a sudden the game ends with them getting down there and trying a real long field goal into the wind. It didn't even get to the end zone. That's all they could try, and that's how the game ended, 3-3. But just don't have that reverse. If it gets 9, given that we'd stuffed 2 downs before that, and they only got it because they ran a reverse, they kind of had to go for it, which they may not have made. Let's say they got 5. Now, they're going to punt it, or they're going to go for it 4th and 5. They probably would have tried to punt it because it's late, and if we don't get a first down, they may be thinking, nah, they got to kick a long field goal. But I wasn't worried about no long field goal. I knew what was going to happen when we get to the long field goal. All right. And, but it wasn't going to be a long field. It was going to be a 40, 45 at the most field goal. It wasn't going to be long. And if we made a first down, it's going to be 30-yard field goal with a wind. I done kicked so many balls out in Barbers with that south wind blowing behind me. I knew what was going to happen, but it didn't happen. That's what happened in the state championship game. But just recently, I looked at the stats, and I was surprised. We didn't have as near the much yardage they did. But it felt like we were in control because it felt like, okay, when we get the win, you know what I mean? When we got the win the time before, that's when we had the drive and got the 3 points, right? But they're running the ball. We're both running the ball, so the clock is rolling. A 12-minute quarter was lasting, 16, 18 minutes, you know what I mean? Because it's running the whole time, And so the game got over in a hurry. And it's kind of like got down to that one drive. We get one more first down, we're going to win it. Or we just make them punt it or go for it 4th and 5 and stuff them or whatever, and we're winning the game. But we didn't. It ended up being tied. They didn't win 2 state championships and going for a 3rd in a row because they weren't well coached. And from what I understand, the way things were in Sonora, all the first graders were given a T-shirt. Story I heard later. When you was a first grader, it said state champion 12 years from whatever that year was. All the first grade boys got a shirt to that effect.
Explain Deweyville.
I missed the 100 point against Deweyville, and no, he did not ask me to miss it. I missed it. That was the one kick in my career, and it wasn't a pressure kick. We're up 99-0, but we want to get 100, and I missed that son of a gun to the right. And of all the stuff I did, you don't know how many people, because they hear about 99-0, and they hear about, well, he missed the extra point, he could have got 100. I already kicked 13 in a row that night before I missed that one, which was the state record. But heck, we don't remember those 13 you made, Jabo. We remember that one you missed. So I've had to apologize for that one for decades. Yeah, I missed it. Wish I'd have made it.
In the early 1990s, your state record for most extra points in a career was about to be broken. Tell us about that event.
So I'm living up in Dallas, and I'm running. I'm up there doing my business. This is about 1991. Maybe it's 91 or 92, and I'm reading the Dallas newspaper, and there's an article in there, and it's about a kid that plays for South Lake Carroll, which is up there on the north side of Dallas-Fort Worth. I think it was Jason Hernandez was his name. And I read the article, and it was saying he's going to break the state record for the most extra points in a career. It was part of the storyline, right? And, well, that's my record. And, I ought to drive up there and see that kid break my record, And it was in a town, as I recall, named Springtown or Stringtown or something like that. It's up north, about 90 miles north of Fort Worth, up heading toward Amarillo, Wichita Falls or something, I think is how you get to it. So I get in my car once I got cleaned up and headed off, and I went to the game, and I got there, and game had already started. It took me longer to get there than I thought. It's further than I thought, but I got there probably at the end of the first quarter or something, and it was an old little stadium, and they were the visitors, and they were on the visitor side, and it was packed. South Lake Carroll shows up, right? They'd already won some state championships and stuff by then, moving up. They kept winning for 20 or 30 more years too, still winning. But so I walked down to the fence, and their trainer was there, and I said, "Hey, where's Jace? Where's your kicker?" And whatever his name was, I knew it. I think it's Jason Hernandez. And I said, "I'm the guy. He's going to break my record tonight when he kicks." Of course, he only needed like 2 or something, and you knew they were going to score a bunch of points, and they always did. And so, "Oh, hey, you're in?" I said, "Yeah, I'm Jabo Leonard. I'm the guy who's going to break. Where is he?" And he got his attention. He brought him over there. I shook his hand. I said, "Man, congratulations on a great career. That's my record you're going to break tonight. I'm proud of you." And he was happy to see me and everything. And he kicked it and all that kind of stuff. And then when the game was over, they had me come out, said, well, when this is over, hang around. We'll talk to you, you know. And so I got to go after the game was over with, and his mom and his dad and him and I were on the field back, you know, behind in front of the goalpost, and we had a picture made and everything. So it was kind of a neat moment to pass the torch. I can't remember what the number. I think it was like 178 or something. That he kicked 179. Now the record's probably, well, he kept playing that year, so I don't know how high he got it. But now with these offenses and these kickers kick 4 years, I just kicked 3 years.
What does Band of Brothers mean to you?
Coach Sharp would call it, we're a band of brothers. Band of brothers. He'd do this before every game. We would say the Lord's Prayer, and then or right before the Lord's Prayer, as I recall. Anyway, he would talk anything he was going to say pre-game, but he always ended Band of Brothers. Lord's Prayer. That's how it went. And at the state championship game, that's exactly the same thing happened. And when it did, I started crying just like I did now, because I knew that's the last time I was ever going to hear. When you're a bunch of 18, 17-year-old kids, and you, because you knew that's the last game, no matter what. It's a state championship game. I'll never get to do this again with these guys. And I'd gone to school with most of them since the first grade. But when he did that, oh, God, what a moment in my life. Then when I went out, I'll say this too. I remember we were at Austin Reagan High School, because we had played at College Station in the semifinals on A&M's field. We didn't play good on that turf, and he didn't want to play on Memorial Stadium because it was turf back then, and we had played bad. So he was looking for another stadium. He wanted to play in Austin because Sonora was out west, so it was kind of a good place for us to meet. And so we played it all on Austin Reagan's field. And Austin Reagan had won, they were the national champions 2 of the previous 3 years. They'd won like 3 state championships in 4 years, and they were declared national champions 2 of those years. Had a good friend of mine played on that team, played with me at Lamar. But we were playing on their stadium. And the night of the state championship game, it was a norther blowing in, 20 to 30 mile an hour sustained north wind. And I just remember after we had that coming together, Band of Brothers, Lord's Prayer, heading out and coming out of the dressing room, heading out on the field for warm-ups. I couldn't hardly see anything. There were so many tears coming out of my eyes. And that wind was blowing in my eyes, and it was just taking it all in. Of course, I got my composure, and we had a game and all that, obviously, but it was a moment in my life I'll never forget. In the dressing room and when I went out thinking, this is it, last game ever with my buddies.
Our mission is to preserve the rich history of high school football, honoring the players, coaches, and schools that have shaped the game. While most may never move beyond the Friday night lights, in their moment, they are the heroes of their schools and communities. Few truly understand the dedication, sacrifice, and hard work it takes to build winning teams and culture. Through our channel, we strive to share and safeguard their stories, ensuring their legacy lives on for generations to come. If you, your team, or school have a story to tell about your high school football memories, contact us at fdaynightsheroes@gmail.com.